Good evening and welcome to the April 24th Board of Education organizational meeting. We'll start with the roll call from Ms. Haas.
Mrs. Bukta,
Here.
Mr. Rogers,
Here.
Mrs. Sully,
Here.
Mrs. Reynolds. Here. Mr. Nickram.
Here. All right, and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alrighty, as we start every board meeting with is reading our vision and mission statement. Our vision statement reads, achieving distinction in all that we do, while our mission statement reads, cultivate an inclusive, high-performing culture of growth and community. We are moving on to the appointment of temporary chairperson that is customary for the organizational meetings this evening.
I move that Corey Nickram be temporary chairman.
No,
What?
He
was it?
I'm sorry.
He actually cannot be the
Yeah.
temporary
Oh.
chairman. It would normally be me that
Oh.
gets nominated.
I think you said he.
Then dear old Lisa.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Rogers, a second by Ms. Reynolds. All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed? All righty.
Okay, and then going on to item 2B, suspension of operating rules. There is a motion there for the board to consider.
Be it resolved that the operating rules of the board be suspended for the purpose of electing district officers.
I'll second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, and then just a couple of procedural items to take care of before we start the election of the board officers. So, one item for the board to consider is if there are 3 or more nominees for an office, the board may consider automatically dropping the nominee with the fewest votes from all subsequent rounds of voting. Would someone like to make a motion as such? And if you need clarification, let me know.
No, we should be fine.
Go ahead.
We don't need a motion for that.
We do need a motion for that. So it's just a procedural item saying that if there are 3 or more nominees for an office, the board may consider automatically dropping the nominee with the fewest votes. So we know what the procedures are once we get into the election process.
So move.
Okay, thank you.
There you go.
And a second?
A second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, the second item for the board to consider is in the event of a contested position, would the board prefer to vote via secret ballot or public vote? And then again, would someone like to make a motion to either vote via secret ballot or public vote?
I'll make a motion for a public vote.
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the last thing, this is just a note. If a board member is serving the last year of their term, it is advised that they do not serve as board clerk due to being unable to serve on the Board of Canvassers for the election. Okay, and with that note, we will start the elections. So nominations are now open for president. Are there any nominations for president? And you may self-nominate.
I move Corey Nickram be president.
I'll second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And
self-vote
Corey,
as
do you
well, yeah.
accept the nomination for president?
I do.
Thank you. Are there any additional nominations for president? Okay, seeing no additional nominations, would someone like to make a motion to close nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for Corey Nickram for president?
So moved.
I'll second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? And congratulations, Corey Nickram is now our board president.
Again.
Again, continuing. Okay, vice president. Nominations are now open for vice president. Are there any nominations for vice president, and you can self-nominate?
Again, remind me, who's the current vice president?
Amy.
Amy Reynolds.
I move Amy Reynolds be vice president.
I'll second that.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And Amy Reynolds, do you accept the nomination for vice president?
I do.
And are there any additional nominations for vice president? Seeing no additional nominations, would someone like to make a motion to close nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for Amy Reynolds for vice president?
Yes, move to close.
Thank you. And second?
I'll second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? And congratulations, Amy Reynolds, you are now continuing to be our vice president. All right, nominations are now open for treasurer. Are there any nominations for treasurer? Again, you can self-nominate.
I nominate Robin Sully.
I'll second that.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And Robin Sully, do you accept the nomination for treasurer?
I do.
Are there any additional nominations for treasurer? Seeing no additional nominations, would someone like to make a motion to close nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for Robin Sully for treasurer?
So moved.
And second?
I'll second.
Amy's got that.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
And congratulations, Robin Sully is now our treasurer. And moving on to clerk, nominations are now open for school board clerk. Are there any nominations for clerk? And you can self-nominate.
I'll nominate Chris Rogers as clerk.
And a second?
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
And Chris Rogers, do you accept the nomination for clerk?
I do.
Are there any additional nominations for clerk? Seeing no additional nominations, would someone like to make a motion to close nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for Chris Rogers for school board clerk?
Motion to close.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And congratulations, Chris Rogers, you are now our school board clerk. Okay, and we can now return to normal operating rules. So Corey,
All righty.
our
Back to
president,
it.
can take over.
All right, we have, going to new business here, selection of representative for 2023 CISA 2 convention.
That's typically in June, in Whitewater.
Looks like June 20th here.
Chris, you did that last year, right?
I did.
Do you want to do it again this year?
Sure, if I can tell a funny story about what happened last time.
Mr. President,
Move for Chris Rogers to be able to tell a funny
I
story.
would second that.
Me for not to be any held responsible for anything said.
I lost my way and.
To Whitewater?
In
It's a-
Whitewater,
it's
yeah.
a weird spot back there.
Yeah,
Innovation Drive.
So I stopped, and I got out of the car, and I saw this guy, and I went up to him, I said, "Hey, wait a minute, I gotta talk to you." And he says, "Get away from me, I got my gun." And he ran into his car. And I go, "Sir, I was just asking for directions." He goes, "Oh," he says, "I'm going through a divorce, I thought you were a process server." That almost
You
got
continued
shot.
to talk to him after he said, "Get away, I got my gun."
Wow.
Okay,
So Chris
well,
will be doing that again then, to see if he
I
can back
definitely
that.
I'm taking
move-
my gun.
I definitely move for Chris Rogers to serve as a representative to the 2023 CISA 2 convention.
I'll second that one.
All right, a motion by Ms. Selly, a second by Ms. Reynolds. All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed? All right. Moving on for appointment of representative to the Wisconsin Association of School Boards. Who currently is that?
That's
Is
me.
that Amy?
Just, all right,
No,
I was
Amy
good with
Watson.
that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll do that again if
Then I'll make a motion that Amy Reynolds be the representative.
Okay,
Second.
thank you. All right, we have a motion by Mr. Rogers, a second by Ms. Selly. All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed?
If you
And-
would prefer a delegate, you'd need to take, now you would need to take a separate action for an
Sure.
alternate.
Oh, yes.
All right,
So move that Rona Bukta serve as the alternate delegate.
I'll second.
thank you. All right, a motion by Ms. Selly, a second by Ms.
I didn't know
Reynolds,
if I could do that myself.
for Rona to be the delegate. All
Are
those-
these separate offices?
They're not, they're
No.
participatory events as part of the school board convention in
Okay.
January.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? All right. Moving on to selection of board committee assignments. Looks like we have 5 in front of us here, each requiring 2 board members. So if you're doing the math, that is 2 board members per committee here. So we'll work on,
So,
Yeah, so certified staff, including negotiations, I mean, that will be a committee that we will be using probably this summer, I'm guessing, when we work with FIA to work on the one item that the teachers union can negotiate up to the level of CPI. So that committee will have some work. Finance and operations, of course, we do have a new director of business services, Nathan Knitt, joining us. So that committee doesn't necessarily have a ton of work beyond, keeping up to speed there. Personnel, I do think that we'll probably have some handbook work coming up through HR. Parts of that document just need some updating in general, so that committee might have a little bit of action next year. Policy, as many of you know, is we meet periodically, but given the system that we're using now is not as labor intensive as it had been in the past.
do we
And-
still need that one?
Yeah, yes, you do,
Okay.
because there are instances where it's helpful for me to have people be able to vet and pre-read and those
Okay.
types of things. And then sponsorship, those of you who have done that, that's usually the fund committee, because that's aligning businesses or organizations to support us financially by sponsoring events or facilities
Yeah.
around the district.
I make a motion that Rona Bukta, Chris Rogers be on the certified staff committee, that Amy Reynolds and Rona Bukta be on the finance and operations committee, that Corey Nickram and Robin Selly be on the personnel committee, that Chris Rogers and Amy Reynolds be on the policy committee, and Robin Selly and Corey Nickram be on the sponsorship committee.
would there be, so that's what we have this year. Would there be any changes that anybody would like to switch committees at all?
Robin, did you want to do the finance and operations flip-flop with me at sponsorship since you've taken up treasurer?
Yeah, that probably makes sense.
I'll amend my motion accordingly.
Right.
All right, so, do you have that, Lisa?
I do.
I do.
Okay. Is anyone else like to be on any other committee that they're currently not serving on other than what was recommended?
No, I'm good with
Okay.
that.
All right, there's necessarily no motion that needs to be along with that. it's just a
That's
discussion,
correct.
Yeah, okay. Everybody's good with that? We can move on to item D. And Dr. Abbott,
Yep, authorization of depositories. This needs to happen on an annual basis. It could be read as written. There are no changes of any substantive nature to our procedures from last year. This does, you will notice in the resolution, have the updated name of Nathan Knitt, our new Director of Business Services, which is an edit that we need to have ready to go. So this will take care of that upon his commencing work with the school district.
And it keeps Jason on until he is
Yeah,
done?
yeah.
Okay.
This is for the 23-24 school year.
Okay, sounds good. So move item 3D under the April 24th agenda as written.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Sully, a second by Ms. Bookta, and a roll call, please, Ms. Hess.
Mrs. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mrs. Bookta?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Mrs. Selly?
Yes.
Mr. Nickram?
Yes. All right, moving on to item E, the resolution to authorize Director of Business Services to invest in district funds. Dr. Evans.
Yes, this is something you want to do, but again, it takes annual action for you to allow our Director of Business Services to make those investments on your behalf.
Okay. We have a motion in front of us here.
Move for item 3E in the April 24th agenda as written.
Second?
All right, motion by Ms. Sully, a second by Mr. Rogers, and a roll call, please.
Mrs. Selly?
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mrs. Bookta?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Mr. Nickram?
Yes. All right, moving on to item F, the discussing times for the school board meeting that happens the third Thursday of each month, typically at 6:30 PM. If there's any discussion on changing the day to the time, or the day, time, anything like that. I would like to have some discussion on moving this to a little bit earlier. I think that would get people home a little bit earlier. We have some discussion, I'm good with 5:30 or 6, but I think moving that early would be,
It's okay with me.
yeah.
Is there any issues with that with the school or anything like that? Or with
I don't
the
think there's any
administration?
logistical issues necessarily. I mean, our board attendance has really improved since we've been streaming and providing video. So most people attending the meeting are able to do that from home or obviously play the meeting back. 5:30 is, I think, typically outside of most people's workday who work during the day, but obviously there are many, many people who work second or third shift as well. But logistically here, there's no problem that way.
I think 5:30. I
Yeah.
mean, if we're going to move it, I'd rather move it an hour earlier.
Mhm.
If you guys are
I'm
okay
good
with
with
that?
that.
Yeah,
Be okay with me.
yeah.
And if at one point you wanted to make another change, you could, you know, so,
Yeah.
but that would begin,
And I know last year we had some discussion about changing the day, but that really wasn't,
We,
No.
yeah,
Feasible
I believe
for the
we
district,
we
right?
could do that. I think it gooses a lot of things up. And I know for me personally, when we have board meetings on Monday, or I think it was suggested, it just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you know, it throws,
Thursday is the best for me.
yeah.
okay.
Okay. So are we good with 5:30 on the third Thursday of
Yeah.
each month?
Yeah,
and if I
What?
could, would that commence in May?
So
Oh,
it
it's already-
would,
you're right.
right, so as soon as they do the motion on that,
Right.
it would
Okay.
carry over.
So I'm just making that point.
So
because
starting May.
As the newly seated new board, then this would take place for your next regular meeting.
Sure. Okay,
Okay, you need a motion, right?
that would be great.
Be it resolved that the regular Board of Education meetings will be held on the third Thursday of each month, starting in May, at 5:30 PM at the Luther Administrative Center, 201 Park Street, Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin, except when changed or modified by resolution of the board.
Second?
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Rogers, a second by Ms. Selly. All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed? All right.
Will we still be having Zoom as an option if somebody's out of town?
Yep, by policy, those options are still available.
Okay.
And we have the last motion in
Are
front
we
of us
done?
this evening.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education adjourn.
Second?
All right, motion by Ms. Reynolds, a second by Ms. Sully. All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed? All righty, 5:49,
Oof.
adjourned.